I'm not going to rely too much on technology. They were aids more for Siobhan, I think, than myself. Good morning, and many, many thanks to Pobble for the opportunity to speak today and reflect on a topic that gave me much pleasure and became for me, quite literally, a lifesaver. So there's no need for me to declare my bias. But what I will declare is that I have 3 key tasks to achieve this morning. And one is to share my own personal lived experience and how that's enhanced community-based education in Kilbarrack. The second one is I have to carry a message forward for those who have no voice in terms of what's happened with community development projects. And the third task is to build alliances with Pobble and other key providers, because we need to build very, very strong alliances in the days, months and years ahead. So, start with, I love learning. I believe in adult and community education, and I cherish the potential and possibilities that lifelong learning offers us. And in good educational practice, I'm going to share a little of my own world and lived experience. The topic of the conference isn't always an easy one for me to address: delivering lifelong learning in disadvantaged communities. My own community experiences poverty and inequality and has had decades of unemployment. We experience economic, social and educational disadvantage and very, very high levels of ill health, which is a result of long-term unemployment. That was the background to my own tentative, hesitant steps towards second chance education. Bernie Brady would be a witness to some of my earlier forays into adult education. But like most women in my social class, I was an early school leaver. I went back to school 22 years after sitting my primary cert, nervously trying out a basic English class, a small step towards finding the woman who got lost between the vows and rows of marriage and mothering and bearing and caring for 5 children at that point alone. I saw adult education as the means of developing myself, my learning group and my community. Words such as frere, emancipatory learning, process, political analysis were transforming words for me, and they guided me and helped me and kept me going. And when these were coupled with feminism, social class and gender analysis, it was bliss. It was like coming home. So thanks again for giving me the chance to name my own world. It's interesting that Neill and I are coming from that context. This thing called community education transformed me in small and subtle ways and began to transform aspects of our community. Frere, feminism and experiential learnings led to a bolder, more confident group of women, spurred on by the belief that we could effect social change, and we saw adult education as the means for achieving some of these goals, both as students and providers of education. That was the unique thing in Kilbarrack in the early days, that while we were availing of education ourselves, we were designing and delivering classes that were relevant to our lived experience. And I would that the same thing was happening today. These were the heady years of the 80s and 90s, and adult and community education was flourishing in working class areas and being designed and delivered by radical working class women. Having moved from my initial goal to learn about grammar, I now occupy a key position in the community by providing a continuum of lifelong learning. As manager of a community development project, I am responsible for 3 community creches that cater for the learning needs of 70 babies, toddlers and waddlers. I directly manage 3 after-school projects with a total of 97 children, and I'm a director of the Kilbarrack Youth Project that worked with 70 teenagers. And finally, my own community development project provides services for over 60s. We provide other services including women's health groups, social studies and creative and community arts, and we have a number of action groups still working locally. All of the action and groups I've just named, I carried with me in all of those funding applications, the direct running of them, the recruitment of staff. I carried with me the processes that had worked for me, and I instilled the same and tried to instill the same ethos among the staff. As I say, I carried my belief in experiential learning and still believe that reflecting the lived experience of the student was about the search for equality and social justice. For me, the 5 founders of the education group I worked with and who are ultimately still working in the community. This, as I say, is just more an aid memoir for me. Lifelong learning and equality for me was not just about naming words, but naming worlds. respecting the learner and their lived experience as individuals and as groups or community. Arguing for equality in education took most of our early years as an education group in Kilbarrack, communicating with educators about the portrayal or betrayal of social class in textbooks and other educational materials, pointing out the absence of working class culture. These early forays led to a need to understand and argue for the constructs of equality. Time is too short to explore those, and Neill has done an absolutely incredible job about kind of framing that landscape for us. But adult and community education can still provide the space for a continuing dialogue on the topic of inequality. And as well as referring to Neill's own work and reputation, I refer to the work of Kathleen Lynch and John Baker in UCD in the School for Social Justice. Frere maintains that part of the struggle for equality and social justice rests with the most oppressed in society realising their ability to change and transform society, as against what Ivan Ilyich calls, and he highlights the way in which education can be presented as a pre-packed set of ideas rather than coming from or building on the lived experience. I'm focusing at this point on community and continuing education. The lived experience in the case of Kilbarrack began with 5 working class women coming together to set up courses. The first course they called was kind of, really in the end it was inspiring. They did the community and how it works, and that was devised by a community worker from Dublin Corporation. This led to an interest in community development and community education, and the terms became intertwined for us and for the original founders with, community development, community education for us became intertwined. We set about running poverty action groups, media studies, women's studies and political studies. The group grew, the premises grew, the arguments grew, and the students came in their hundreds to avail of the courses just mentioned, as well as leaving cert courses and an absolutely incredible literacy and numeracy provision. And this was all run by volunteers and is still run by volunteers. Volunteers are this country's greatest asset. We did this all under the banner that the personal is political. Local actions such as the DART Action Group, the Flats Action Group, were the precursors of today's regeneration groups, except without the betrayal of the developers who pull out halfway through. We actually did what we set out to do. Experiential and imaginative education led to some very, very good local initiatives, and we should not forget the lessons learned in these initiatives. I can't be honest and